The drive was supposed to be quick, a 4-hour road trip across empty highways, just her, the music, and the hum of the road. Amy had done it countless times. But today was different, tonight, in fact, was different. Amy glanced at her phone, no service, as usual. The sun had dipped below the horizon faster than she'd anticipated, leaving her wrapped in a velvet cloak of black, dotted with sparse starlight. She regretted not leaving earlier. This route, on its best days, was eerily quiet, but at night? It was a dead zone. The rumble of her car underfoot was a reassuring beat until it began to sputter, then cough. No, 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 Amy muttered, her grip on the wheel tightening. The fuel gauge needle danced on empty, mocking her for ignoring it at the last gas station nearly 20 miles back. She mentally berated herself, and her heart hammered as her car rolled to a slow, sickly stop. Amy flicked on her emergency flashers and sat in silence, listening to the ambient sounds outside. The ticking of the cooling engine was quickly swallowed by the empty night. She took a deep breath, glanced at her phone again. Still no service. In a place like this, she should have known better. She sat in the dark, debating her options. There was nothing but an endless stretch of two-lane road, surrounded by towering pine trees that whispered secrets in the wind. For a fleeting moment, she considered waiting until morning. But she pushed that thought aside, knowing the dangers of staying in one place on a dark road. Other than her flashlight, she had nothing. With a grimace, Amy opened the door. Cold air rushed in, prickling her skin. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and stepped out onto the asphalt. The silence was suffocating. She looked down the road, squinting against the beam of her flashlight. The dark line of trees framed her, indifferent to her plight. "Well, guess I'm walking," she whispered, a pathetic attempt to comfort herself. As she started along the roadside, her footsteps seemed to echo, exaggerated in the stillness. The trees loomed taller and closer the farther she got, as if they'd moved in to block her escape. She walked for what felt like an eternity, constantly looking over her shoulder, though she knew there was no one behind her. Still, a cold, prickling sensation persisted at the back of her neck. She was about to give up and head back when she noticed a glimmer in the distance, a faint glow that flickered like a candle. She stopped, squinting, her heart racing with cautious hope. "A house?" she murmured, though it seemed an unlikely sight out here. The more she stared, the brighter it became, until she was certain it was a porch light. Relief washed over her, pushing aside her fear, and she quickened her pace. As she approached, she realized the house was small and aged, nestled in a clearing surrounded by more trees. The porch light flickered weakly, casting long shadows over peeling paint and broken window shutters. Her gut told her to turn back, but her desperation won out. The thought of getting back to her car and waiting out the night was unbearable. Besides, she just needed to call for help. Amy approached the door and knocked, the hollow thud echoing unervingly in the night. She waited, glancing back at the road, half expecting to see headlights in the distance. She turned back, surprised to see the door ajar. She didn't remember hearing it open, but maybe the wind had nudged it. Hesitating for a moment, she called out. "Hello? Is anyone here?" The house was silent. Still, that was nothing new. Most people in rural areas went to bed early. She poked her head inside, shining her flashlight around. It was an older house, the kind you might find in a horror movie, a musty old rug, shelves lined with dusty knickknacks, and walls adorned with family portraits that stared down with blank, faded eyes. She took a step inside, trying to stay quiet as her gaze swept over the strange decor. She told herself to just find a phone, call a tow, and get out. But something about the house was off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but there was a heavy stillness, like the air was thicker here, almost damp. Her flashlight's beam fell on a rotary phone resting on a small table by the wall. Relief washed over her again. She picked it up and brought it to her ear, only to hear nothing. No dial tone, just dead silence. "Of course," she muttered, slamming it down in frustration. A creak from above made her freeze. She held her breath, shining her light toward the staircase. She had the sudden, irrational urge to call out, to announce herself as if she were an intruder, but no words came. "Hello?" she tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. Nothing. The house stared back in silence. She wanted to leave, but some morbid curiosity rooted her in place. She hadn't noticed it at first, but as she looked closer at the walls, she realized the family portraits were wrong. The faces were blurred, eyes sunken in shadow, lips stretched into strange, strained expressions. She leaned closer to one of the photos, squinting in the dim light, when the door behind her slammed shut. She jumped, heart pounding as she whirled around. The door was closed. She hadn't touched it, had she? Amy's mind raced. She decided it was time to leave, to get back to her car and take her chances. She didn't care about the cold, the dark, anything was better than this house. She grabbed the doorknob and twisted, but it wouldn't budge. She twisted harder, panicking, pulling with all her strength, but it was as if the knob was frozen in place. She backed away, her breath coming in shallow gasps. That's when she heard it, the soft, uneven creak of footsteps above her. Someone, or something, was moving. "Please," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "Just let me go." The footsteps continued, growing louder, moving toward the staircase. She couldn't see anyone, but the sounds were unmistakable. She backed up slowly, her flashlight shaking in her trembling hand. Her heart felt like it would burst from her chest as the footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. She could feel something watching her from the shadows, though her light revealed nothing but an empty hall. "Go away," she managed to choke out, but the footsteps continued, closer and closer. Suddenly, the light flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. Amy fumbled with it, desperate to get it working, but it was useless. She was trapped, alone, surrounded by suffocating blackness. "Please, please," her voice was barely a whisper. And then she felt it, a cold, bony hand on her shoulder. She spun around, but there was nothing. Just the empty darkness pressing in on all sides. The footsteps started again, right next to her, circling, taunting. She backed into the wall, too terrified to move. She closed her eyes, willing herself to wake up from this nightmare. But when she opened them, she saw something in the hallway, a figure, tall and thin, its face obscured by shadow. It didn't move, but she could feel its eyes on her, watching, waiting. Finally, she mustered the courage to speak. What do you want?" The figure tilted its head, a sickeningly slow movement, and then it stepped forward, revealing a face twisted in a horrific, unnatural smile. Its eyes were hollow, black pits that seemed to devour the light. Amy's body locked up in terror as the figure reached out, its hand stretching toward her. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She could feel its icy grip tightening around her wrist, pulling her closer. Her vision blurred as she struggled, the room spinning around her. And then, everything went black. The next morning, a trucker found Amy's car abandoned on the side of the road, the keys still in the ignition. No one ever saw her again. Some say her ghost wanders those back roads, trying to find her way home, forever trapped in that last, desperate walk toward the glow of a light that never truly existed.